Book Stew viewers and listeners. I have a really fascinating memoir to share with you today. The book is called The Magician's Daughter, and it's by Katy Grabel. And before I introduce Katy, I just want to tell you what I was thinking about when I got the advanced reader copy of the book, because magic, I'm not I know there's a lot of magic fantasy that's going on in fiction these days, and that's not my lane. So it had been quite a while since I had encountered anything that had to do with magic or magicians. So I was thinking back on my experiences, my literary experiences with magic and magicians. And so what I thought about was, first of all, the book The Magician's Nephew by C.S. Lewis, which is part of the Narnia series, which was one of my favorite of the series. And then The Magician's Assistant by Ann Patchett, who, has become such a well-known fiction writer, but at the time this was only her third book, and I think it did get made into a TV movie. And then the big one for me was Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke, which was just a consuming fiction, long fiction about two battling magicians, and it was fascinating. So when I was offered Katy's memoir to bring to Book Stew, I said, oh, this would just, it's an area that I have not been reading about a lot, so I was thrilled to welcome her. So Katy, sorry this introduction took so long. Welcome to Book Stew.
Thank you. It's really good to be here. It's great. There is a lot of books right now. They're fantasy books, and they're called Magicians. The Magician's Daughter. There's a middle grade book, and then there's a fantasy YA book. But yeah, this is a real story of a daughter of a magician.
Which is you.
It's me.
So one of the things that's so fascinating about this is that it takes place over a very short period of time. Can you explain the circumstances that brought you to all these stages across the West and California and the West Coast?
You mean everything that sort of led up to the tour? I really struggled for a while, what was the focus of the book? And for a while, the focus was my whole entire adult life under the lens of my parents' magic show. But as time went on, I realized it was too broad. I had to narrow it. And I realized this story was really this brief period of time when I was kind of in that transitional place between being a kid and being a young adolescent. And I realized that, wow, that was a really powerful time. And it really made a big impression on me because this was my father's big dream. And I saw him mobilize it. I saw him. The magic show was basically a bunch of old equipment in crates in the garage. And I saw him over a year and a half breathe a life into it and make it a magic show again. So what happened was earlier in his life, he'd been a big traveling illusionist, but this was all before I was born. They played Middle America. There was my mom. They had a pretty big illusion show. They had a crew. They had a truck. But they were forced off the road because people weren't really going to live entertainment anymore. He had to just get a regular job. That's when I was born. When I was 14, Las Vegas was becoming a really big venue for magicians. And he decided he was going to make a big comeback to professional magic and hit it big as a Las Vegas magician. And he ended up booking a tour because he thought that tour would give him the connections for a Vegas booking. So he took the show out of storage. He got a truck. He got a crew again. The whole show had about, including him, 8 people in it. We covered 5 states, and we were gone almost 4 months.
And that was 4 months that you were taken out of school. You were 14 years old. This is in 1977. Probably at one of the most critical junctures of adolescence and most difficult time, where even the most comfy suburban circumstances are sometimes miserable for a 14-year-old girl. Mm-hmm. And I know you had an older sister who had, before you, when your father and mother were traveling as magicians and the magician's assistant, she had gone with them, and you were kind of envious of that
Yeah.
part of her life.
Yeah, I was. And there was a big box of photos, and I talked about that in the book. And but at that time, I didn't know very much about the magic show. But yeah, I would look through the photos, and there she was, and I was envious. So when I got a chance to be on stage in their magic show, I was really excited. It was a difficult time, 14 years, but I didn't like school. I was really unhappy at school. I got along with my parents, and this was really exciting. And I had a big fantasy life about wanting to be famous. I loved music, and I would dance and sing in my bedroom, and I talk about that. So when the magic show came along, it was like, oh, this is great. I get to be on stage. But it wasn't quite like, as I say, singing my hit songs on the Hollywood Bowl, but it was close enough. I got to just dress up. And my body was changing, and getting to wear lipstick, getting to wear nylons and a leotard and sequins was just so exciting. And I think what it really showed me was that it's okay to pursue your most outlandish dreams. This was a pretty outlandish dream that my father had. And so what it taught me as an adult, it taught me a lot of things, but that it's okay. It's okay to do that.
But while you were going through it, there were certainly some times when the show went really well and you got a great audience response. But there were also difficulties that were kind of beyond your capability of fixing things. It was up to your parents to handle all the work that goes into putting on a traveling show, including procuring a horse and including an upside down piano. But I want to go back to the illusionist, which is what you called your dad. What would you say is the difference between a magician and an illusionist?
Yeah, good question. An illusionist tends to have a big theatrical show. There's a lot of magicians, and other magicians might just have a show they carry in their car, or a show they do that by themselves, something smaller. But illusionists tend to be drawn to many assistants, big theatrical shows, big illusions. An illusionist would saw a woman in half. An illusionist would float a ball or something. And that's the difference. And one time I asked a magician, I said, how are they different psychologically? And he said, well, they just have bigger egos. I mean, and I had to agree with that. Like, yeah, I can see that.
But
I think it takes a different type of entertainer to want to be an illusionist as opposed to a magician.
Well, and I'm hoping that you'll share some pictures with me of your parents that we'll put up during the episode. Your father had this silver mane of beautiful hair and it seems to me the bearing of someone who is very regal, which must have been part of the narrative of being an illusionist who has capabilities and skills beyond that of a mere mortal. And your mother was a knockout, and your mother's role in the whole production I thought was fascinating. Can you talk a little bit about what your dad did versus what your mom did?
My dad, of course, was an entertainer. He loved the applause. He loved being out there. He just loved entertaining and making people laugh and creating this experience for people. But he was really dependent on my mother because she ran everything from a table stage right. She did the music, she did the curtains, sometimes she did the lights. I mean, she did everything.
And really, it wasn't not her idea. I mean, her managerial skills were amazing, and her ability to adapt. And when things went wrong, she just had, I mean, to me, in a way, she was the magic that she could put everything back together when things fell apart. But it really wasn't her first choice for a life for herself either. I mean, I thought you talked a bit about your mom's background and on what she did and didn't want to do. Can you discuss that a little?
Yeah.
Because I thought that was a really
Yeah.
great part of the book.
Yeah. So my mother grew up in Oklahoma. She had a big family there. When she met my father during World War II, she thought of him. He said, "Well, she was like, what do you do?" He's like, "Well, I'm a magician." But she thought of him as a soldier who might die in the war. Then he went away. He came back. The war was over, and she realized she had married a magician. So then it's like, well, we need to earn a living. And she says, "Oh, I don't want to be on stage. Oh, I do not want to be on stage." But he said, "But you have to. This is like what we do for a living." So she was very practical. She was pragmatic. She had that Midwestern common sense. So she just jumped into it. She did what she had to do. And this is what they did for a living. That's what it was for her. And she was from the generation of women who just kind of supported their husband in whatever their employment was. But, he needed help. Being a magician, especially an illusionist, you need all kinds of background help. And that was her. And she knew what her duties were really, she took them very seriously. And I think she was really proud of the show. And she was proud of him as an entertainer. And she felt good about the show when they were on the road. And so it was important for her to do what she had to do to make sure everything ran really smoothly. And she did. She was a quick thinker. She could think on her feet. She had great management skills. She could uh, was very, very organized, and you have to be organized in a magic show. I mean, her table, I talk about this, she had everything had a place. And as the props were used in the show, she started packing them right away. And he
And
would have
she
been really
also,
lost without them.
and your parents both had to try and manage these stagehands or helpers. I don't know, the crew who moved
Yeah.
everything, who moved the equipment, who packed
Hmm.
the truck, who unpacked the truck, who helped put the horse in place. Um, as an adolescent, you were
Hmm.
surrounded by these boys who were kind of not who didn't really want to let you in to be part of the group because you were a girl, and that for a 14-year-old girl, I thought you portrayed that kind of sadness that you wouldn't be accepted by them very well. And you could, and that's the part where this kind of coming of age, where you had to accept that you were in a middle role in this. You were not the star. You did appear
No.
on stage, but you
Hmm.
weren't part of the crew either, even though you did some of the work
No.
of the crew. I think that
Yeah.
was a lot for a 14-year-old to take on.
Yeah, it was really excruciating at first because I wanted to belong, but I was in between. I wasn't quite their age. They were a little older. 14, one was 19, 23, 24, I think. And so I wasn't quite there. And so I really just ended up in the triad with my parents. That's really where I belonged in that. And there was some friction between my father and some of the crew. So I really couldn't hang out with them. I belonged really with my parents. I belonged there. And it was difficult, and it kind of makes sense now. And I talk about this too, the young woman assistant. I wanted us to be buddies. But she was there to be my teacher. And I'm like, why? I don't need a teacher. I want to be your friend. And because I had hung out so much with my parents, and as I say, my sense of social position with adults were a little distorted. I just didn't think of myself as a kid. Not really.
It really, you were put in an amazingly difficult position, but you seem to have come through it. I mean, the book, there's a lot of humor in the book about the circumstances you found yourself in. Would you mind doing a short reading for us? We had picked out a couple of things passages that I thought really evoked what it was like to be on the road.
I could start with a 102 first. Okay.
Okay.
When I think back, that paragraph.
Yep.
So this is the first show. We didn't We didn't rehearse as much as we wanted to because we were just so rushed for time. So this is the first show. I'm on stage, and this is the adult kind of reflecting back on, those first moments on stage, what that was like. And this is the opening number. We're all on stage. There's a whole bunch of things happening at once. There's music, there's doves, there's silks, there's all kinds of stuff. When I think back, it still feels surreal to me. Our faces drenched in white light and powder, the blaring music, the resplendent silks that tumbled from my father's top hat, all his jolly prancing amid the flutter of snowy white doves. I find it astounding I was even there, that I was at one time on stage, smiling vacuously amid all that ballyhoo. I remember the spotlight most of all, its heat and ferocious force, the way the spotlight followed my father everywhere, upstage, downstage, and to the top center step, where he showered the audience with dimpled smiles and winks. I wondered if the spotlight was really following him, or was he following the spotlight? So yeah, he was definitely following the spotlight.
So
It wasn't.
let's talk about the writing a little bit because
Okay.
you kept a journal through the
Yeah.
whole trip, which I'm
Yeah.
sure was invaluable in writing the memoir. How did you come to write the memoir?
Oh, okay. Well, I was, this is how I got the idea. I was in my late 20s. My parents were doing playing community colleges. And I was on a road trip and I happened to be traveling by. And they said, you should stop by and see us, see the show. And at that time, it was the small show. The big show had been scaled down to something they could fit in their car, and they were just traveling around. So I came in late, I sat in the back, and when I heard all the old music, I hadn't seen the magic show since I was 14. The patter, the music, and all the old props. It was like, oh my gosh, I was catapulted back. And I could feel young 14-year-old Katy. And all, as I say, her dewy hopefulness. And, in the magic show, I really thought I could be anyone, I could do anything. I was going to do something so impressive and amazing with my life, right? And my adult life was not turning out that way. So I really got into touch with that girl I was and the music, the patter, the whole thing. And I began to see my parents really objectively. They are really unusual. Who has parents like this? And at the time, I was a newspaper reporter. And I thought, I've got to write about this whole experience, these amazing parents being on the road. And that's when I got the idea and I started getting cold chills. And I thought, wow, you got to do this. And that was in my late 20s. And the other thing that inspired me, and I talk about this in the book, was emptying out the old truck with all the old illusions in it. Everything had been in storage for quite some time. My parents had to unload it all. And I was in my 30s and I saw the props again. And I saw the old top hat that I had jumped out of. And that old top hat really was kind of a symbol in the book about, it was sort of like my moment in the spotlight. When no one looked at my father, they looked at me. And I was very stage struck because, I wanted to dance and sing. I wanted to be a rock star. And so that was my moment in the spotlight. And I saw the old top hat again and it all kind of came back. And that's how the book started going. And writing the book was really good for me. It was very healing. I got to go back into time and like young Katy, because I didn't like young Katy as an adult. I thought she was
Oh.
pretty naive and silly, and I was not getting along with my father. And I had really shut my father out from my life. But when I wrote the book, I had to realize all the things he had really taught me.
Did
And
your
that actually
parents
what he had modeled to me was really important.
did your parents read the book?
They died
Oh,
10 years ago.
before you finished it. Oh.
Yeah, but you know what? They couldn't read it because I exposed a lot of the magic tricks. And that's,
Oh,
I
and that's
waited. I waited till I began it in my 30s and early 40s. I'm like, I couldn't finish it. And why can't I finish this book? It was because I didn't want him to read it. I set it aside. I lived my life. I went back to the Bay Area, San Francisco area to help take care of them when they were elderly. Then one day the caregiver said, I think your father is going blind. So my first response was I was really sad because, it's hard to see your vibrant parents become frail. But my second thought was, oh, I guess he'll never read a book. And then that's when I sat down on my computer, 8 months, and I had the beginning, middle, ending. I had the whole structure of the book. It was done.
So that was a story that was just dying to come out. I remember in the book, he had taught you a magic trick. Maybe it was a card trick or a coin trick. And you went to school and showed it to people and you explained to them how it worked.
Yeah.
And he was so mad at you.
I did some deception there. I told him, "Oh, teach me this card trick, his best card trick," but I didn't tell him that it was show and tell, and I was going to do it for the class, and then I was going to tell them how I did it, and that was my plan the whole time. And he showed me. I was fourth grade. I showed it to the class. But that night I came back from school. He's like, "How'd it go?" He was really wanting to know. I said, "Oh, they loved it. They loved it." And then I showed him how I did it. He just never got over that. He never. And I have to laugh because here I am. Here I was years and years later. And look what I did. I exposed everything. But I did talk to Lance Burton. He was my father's good friend. He was a magician in Vegas. And they ended up later in life becoming friends. And I had Lance read it. And I was nervous about Lance reading it because he was a friend of the family. He was a big time professional magician. But he condoned it. He said, "It's okay. Your father's been dead 10 years. It's generally frowned upon, but it's okay." And, I have to say that, I only exposed what I had to. And sometimes the exposure was just kind of like poetic. I was adding some poetic flavor to the story. I really wasn't exposing just to expose stuff unless I had to, unless it was really part of the plot. And I didn't want to, what was happening backstage was really a lot of what was going on in the story. I didn't want to tiptoe around it. Plus, there's something really people think magic shows are not magical, but they are. Do you want to know why?
Yeah.
So people think magic shows are all about deception and hoodwinking people. But I will say that if a magician is really good, it's not about that. It's about showing people a different way of looking at things. And, if a magician's good, and I have to say, we are in a field of potentiality, right, all the time. So a magic show is an invitation to look at things a different way, to see the limited possibilities. But people tend to go to magic shows and they just try and figure things out. Now, I will say for me, being backstage, you would think seeing all the workings of the show would have robbed the magic from me. But in a way, it didn't. Even that felt magical because there was so much secrecy around such a huge body of information. The fake women's feet, the black thread, the little tiny compartments we were hiding in. There's so much secrecy about that. And to actually know it and see it, it was like, it had a feeling of arcane forbidden knowledge. And to have access to it, to know it, being 14 years old, it kind of felt like I had a certain power. It gave me a certain power, or it gave me a certain confidence that these, as I say poetically, these were the secrets of the universe, and I had access to them.
Well, I just have to say, anyone who reads The Magician's Daughter, which I hope the viewers and listeners will find your book and buy it and read it, has you've shared things that I think I have never thought about the why. I never thought about why people actually go to magic shows, and I guess it's to be fooled and to try to figure it out and to recognize that there can be things beyond understanding. So I think the book really expresses that beautifully, and the fact that it's also a coming of age story is just like the icing on the cupcake. So I'm afraid we're out of time. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. I think this is a very unusual book for me, and I really enjoyed it. I highly recommend it. And the other thing I thought of when I finished it is This would make
Uh-huh.
a fantastic movie. I mean, that was what I had, not a
Yeah.
movie that reveals how the tricks were done, but just, from it could even be like a series. I hope at some point there's interest in
Yeah.
it.
Well, that would be great. It's just, getting that attention. But
Oh,
yeah, that would be great. I've been told that, and I think so too. But
all right. Thanks again for coming on
thank you
Book
so
Stew.
much, Eileen.
And viewers and listeners, please pick up your copy of The Magician's Daughter by Katy Grabel
Thank you.
and have a good night.